Hey, this is Sarah Umflett, and welcome to Pine Lake Prep's Spooked. Here you'll hear everything from paranormal activity to Halloween costumes. Here with me is
Jenna Stevens,
Cameron Wills,
Jamae Sidbury,
and we hope you enjoy.
Okay, so this is a scary story. It's called The Killer in the Backseat. It's as told by Emily Dunbar. I don't think anyone's really sure who the author is, which is a little eerie, so...
Nice.
Okay.
Good time.
So, one night, a woman went out to drinks with her girlfriends. She left the bar fairly late at night, got in her car, and onto the deserted highway. After a few minutes, she noticed a lone pair of headlights in her rear view mirror, approaching at a pace just slightly quicker than hers. As the car pulled up behind her, she glanced and saw this turn signal on. The car was going to pass, when suddenly it swerved back behind her, pulled up dangerously close to her tailgate, and the brights flashed. Now she was getting nervous. The lights dimmed for a moment, and then the brights came back on, and the car behind her surged forward. The frightened woman struggled to keep her eyes on the road and fought the urge to look at the car behind her. Finally, her exit approached, but the car continued to follow, flashing the brights periodically. Through every stoplight and turn, it followed her until she pulled into her driveway.
Oh no, you're not supposed to go home.
She figured her only hope was to make a mad dash into the house and call the police. As she flew from the car, so did the driver of the car behind her.
What?
And he screamed, "Lock the door and call the police. Call 911. When the police arrived, the horrible truth was finally revealed to the woman.
I heard the story.
The man in the car had been trying to save her. As he pulled up behind her and his headlights illuminated her car, he saw the silhouette of a man with a butcher knife rising up from the back seat to stab her.
Oh my
So he flashed his brights, and the figure crouched back down. The moral of the story: always check the back seat.
Oh my god, no.
So,
I have heard that story before. I heard that.
yeah, I think you guys probably have.
Oh my gosh. I haven't, but now I'll be checking the backseat of my car
That's
today.
not a true story, is it? I mean, it doesn't have an author.
There's no author, so.
So I can't believe what you want to believe. Oh my goodness.
It's so
Is it weird that it reminds me of a One Tree Hill episode where Brooke just pops out of the back seat in like a cheerleader outfit for Lucas trying to make a move on him? Have you guys seen that episode?
No.
Okay, I'm weird. No, yeah, that's I have heard that story. It's creepy.
Okay.
Oh, we are currently sitting in a very scary classroom. All the lights are out and it is raining outside and there is very little light. So it's pretty spooky for what we are about to talk about.
Just to let you guys know, Sarah is not with us today. Unfortunately, her parents haven't seen her since midnight last night, so we're going to catch you up on what happens with that. Remember, guys, stay awake during the witching hour.
But for now, we're going to try to manage without Sarah. And I'm going to read you a story I found from the Huffington Post. This one is called Satellite Images. A friend of mine showed me how to use Google Maps. I'm sure you've seen it. It lets you use satellite images to look at all locations all over the world. A few years ago, I was in a car accident. Since then, I really don't leave the house that often. It's difficult, and the idea of seeing a car drive by makes me feel lightheaded. I was fascinated by the fact that I could see all over the world, almost like being there. I could virtually walk down the streets, and it almost felt like I was really there. I became instantly hooked. It gave me a real eye on the world. I could go to almost any major city, and I did. I'd seen the streets in China, Japan, Germany, and England. So many places. I'd even gone to tourist attractions, like the Great Barrier Reef and Dracula's Castle. My favorite was to go to random places in major cities and see how many people and animals I could find. The faces of the people were always blurred to protect their privacy, but it was still enjoyable to see them out there, enjoying their life, walking like it was no big deal. She must have good taste, I laughed. I zoomed in closer and noticed the gray bag she carried on a gray and purple shoulder strap. She was walking in a relaxed manner, one hand trailing the wall beside her. I bet if I could have seen her face, I would see that she was smiling. I began to feel a little sad. I let my hands fall into the arms of my wheelchair and looked at her for a minute more. I wished I could be there, walking so carefree with her. That wouldn't happen, though, until I died. I was stuck in this chair. I sighed and zoomed out of Tokyo. Enough of this for tonight. I turned off the computer and went to bed. Do you guys have any thoughts so far?
No.
I just think it's sad.
It's really depressing. This isn't even scary yet.
Oh, just wait. I got up early and decided to look around Paris. Paris was always fun. I liked the look of the city with all that old, beautiful buildings and so many people to watch. I randomly zoomed to an area and saw a street lined with old brick buildings, a few small shops, and an old tan brick church. Ahead was an intersection and dozens of people walked by. A balding businessman walked quickly past, looking back at an old woman, hair covered with a scarf, carrying a large purse. A curvy woman in black pants that were too tight stared into a store window, and two women led a group of small children around the corner. I spun the view around a few more times and then saw something peculiar. Sitting on the bench at the bus stop were two people. One of them was a young woman with her feet stuck in front of her in a relaxed manner. She was wearing a pair of red sneakers, like my own. I was startled for a moment as I noticed the black pants, white t-shirt, and black hooded jacket. Her dark brown hair was tied loosely behind her head. A gray bag sat on the bench beside her, the shoulder strap hooked over her shoulder. This is crazy, I thought. It can't possibly be the same woman. This is a different country, different continent even. How could it be her? This was stupid. It wasn't as if these were live photographs. They were taken ahead of time and then stored. It's not like she was in two places at once. She could just be a traveler. Besides, without seeing her face, it was impossible to tell it was the same person. Brown hair was probably the most common hair color in the world. Those red sneakers were something I purchased online. I'm sure a million of other people did too. I shook my head and went to fix some lunch. When I got back online, I decided to look at Berlin. I picked a random street as usual. It looked pretty empty. There were brick buildings lining the streets, looking more like factories than anything else. There were also empty lots full of long grass and piled gravel. There wasn't much to see at all, really. There was a line of motorbikes and a car with two German flags sticking up from it. After more searching, I found one kid. He looked like he was dressed for school, a jacket thrown over his bag. He was intently looking at some kind of mobile device. I was disappointed. I started to leave, but then I caught something out of the corner of my eye. I turned the view, and there they were, those red sneakers. She was standing on a street corner next to some kind of signpost. She had a hand on the post, looking down the street, as if waiting to cross the street. I stared in shock. How could she be there, too? Even if she was traveling, there's no way I would find her every time. Even finding her in Paris would have been one heck of a coincidence. But this was crazy. Was this some kind of joke? Had Google decided to play a prank on its users? It would have been a great joke. I did a quick search, looking for a note about a woman that shows up like Waldo. There was nothing. I looked through articles on strange things you can see on Google Maps, but none of them mentioned the woman that travels the world with you. This was crazy. Had my self-imposed isolation driven me mad? Had I become so lonely that I created an hallucination for myself? Leaving the Berlin image on my screen, I sent a text to a friend asking him to look at the locations. I asked him if he saw the same woman. Then I waited, hands sweating, heart thumping in my chest. I jumped when my phone beeped with the return text message 10 minutes later. The text read, "I see the lady you're talking about in Berlin. I didn't see her in Paris or Tokyo. Is this some kind of game or what? Are you okay?" I didn't respond, instead returning to the locations in Tokyo and Paris. There she was. She was there, but it was different. She no longer sat on the bus stop bench in Paris. She was standing in front of it, looking for something in her bag. In Tokyo, she was blocks away, squatting down on a pet calico cat. I shivered. Who was she? What was happening? I switched the map to Brussels. It was another city street. It was lined with old-looking buildings with shops on the ground level and what I guessed was apartments above. I quickly scanned the streets. They were empty, other than a stocky woman in a bright blue sweater. I did a second sweep. She wasn't there. I sighed in relief. I couldn't believe I was getting so worked up about this. It was nothing but a... I stopped, my eyes frozen on the screen. There was a building at the point of a fork in the road, white with black ironwork framed balconies jutting from the second floor. I hadn't seen her as I had been looking at the sidewalks, but there she stood, standing on the balcony, her head tilted in the direction of the camera, almost like she was coyly looking at me. My breath caught in my throat. I switched to Sydney. She was leaning against a wall, inside the doorway of a bright blue Carrick's pharmacy building. Lyndon showed her getting ready to step onto a red double-decker bus, her head turned to look over her shoulder. She was everywhere I looked. She stood in a brick sidewalk along a bridge in Venice. She walked across a yellow barred crosswalk in Zurich, in Hong Kong, and she stood between a Wing Lung Bank and McDonald's, adjusting the strap on her bag. In each picture, she came closer and closer to looking directly at me with her blurred-out face. My heart felt like a terrified bird slamming around inside my chest, and I couldn't catch my breath. I wasn't sure what to do. I couldn't call the police. Should I send screenshots to Google? I clenched my fists tightly and closed my eyes. Who was she? Was she following me? Was I following her? I wish I could see the expression on her face, know what she saw when she looked at me. I wanted to get out of the chair and run. Why is that the only thing that made me feel free again? Was the thing that made me feel even more trapped. I had to know. I typed in the name of my town and zoomed into a random street. It was a couple of miles from my house. The gates to the city park were shown in the clarity of daylight, despite it being night here. There she was. There she was. She was only a few miles from my house, standing under the ironwork arch that stated the name of the park. She looked directly at the camera, directly at me. I felt like I might throw up. She was near me, and she was watching me. She was coming for me. What did she want? I typed in the name of the apartment complex where I live. I could see the outside of the building. The parking lot was full of cars, and there were a few blurred-out children on the playground. I searched everywhere for her. She wasn't in the parking lot or on the sidewalks, not hiding between the buildings or standing in the playground. I even scanned each of the cars, behind the bushes, and each of the blurred windows. She wasn't there. I curled tightly around myself and lay my head down on the desk. This place was safe. I didn't leave the apartment anyway. I would never use Google Maps again. I would never see her again. She could stay at the park for all I cared. I smiled to myself and was surprised to find a tear slipping down my face. I'm safe, I said to myself in a whisper. It felt good to hear it out loud. I'm safe. As I said it, there was a knock at the door. A chill ran down my spine. I had a camera hooked to my computer that showed who was at the front door, which made it easier for me with my mobility issues. I slowly reached for the control to show myself who was outside, but my hand trembled furiously. As I touched the control, I realized my mistake. The last of Google's images that I had seen had only shown the outside of the building. Just the outside. I looked at the screen and saw a woman in a white t-shirt, black pants, black hooded jacket, and carrying a gray bag with a purple and gray striped shoulder strap. Of course, there were those red sneakers. She looked directly at the camera, her face still a complete blur. As I tried to stifle a scream, she raised a hand and knocked loudly on my front door.
Oh, that's the end. Oh my gosh. That's terrifying. I just need a moment.
I fully expected you to say that she ended up in the apartment and then her face actually floated in real life. That's what I thought was gonna happen.
That would have been cool. So it kind of left the story open-ended.
Yeah.
So what do you think happened next if you were to make
Probably
up the
died.
end?
I think that was made up, right?
No.
It wasn't?
No.
That was real?
Yes.
Well, the person
But
lived right
the
beside
author is anonymous.
You're lying. No. Okay,
I'm assuming he lived because he had to be the one to write it.
Okay, well, if that was like a fairy tale book, I would say that would be like death.
Yeah.
The person getting closer and closer, because the narrator did say that they were gonna die. Can you turn it off?
No.
Okay, so you can turn it off.
Thanks for listening to Spooked!